Economy Councils Fund, round 3. I'm going to be doing a quick little introduction, and then I'll hand over to my colleagues, Linda Duffy, who's the Program Manager for the Circular Economy Councils Fund, and also Kate Shaw, who's our Project Officer on this program, Circular Economy Councils Fund. Let's start by acknowledgement of country, Kate. And yeah, really want to pay our respects and acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today. I'm talking to you from Bunurong lands down in southern Gippsland, and we want to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the lands that you are all on, joining in this discussion today. The artwork you can see there is produced by a very talented Gunditjmara, Yorta Yorta and Wemba Wemba man, Thomas Day. And this artwork was commissioned by the Victorian State Government. And we feel that this is often used this in our acknowledgement of country as recognising the values that we hold, and also acknowledging the traditional owners that we're all meeting on today. Next slide, please, Kate. So, yeah, today I'm going to quickly go over a background of the Circular Economy Councils Fund. Then we'll move into a bit of an overview of the program. We'll go through eligibility, due diligence, the assessment process, key dates, and hopefully have some time to answer some questions that we'd like you to pose. So next question, please, Kate. Housekeeping. Just a reminder that this is recorded, and we're going to post the recording of this session on the website, SV website, and also the round 3 guidelines. We don't have a chat function, but we have a Q&A function live. You'll see that on the top of your ribbon there. We'd encourage you to pose questions as they come up to you as we go through the content. We are going to work to provide an answer, but we may need to go back and check with our grants team on some of the questions before we post an answer, but we will commit to you to provide an answer to all the questions posed and have that in the mail out that you'll all get towards the end of this week. We also want to flag that you can use the Q&A function if you are a council seeking partnership with other councils in a project proposal. Please put forward the project idea or proposal that you've got and you're looking to collaborate with other councils on. You can put your email in that Q&A box, and then other councils will be able to see that and who the contact person is. And then after the session, we can copy and paste those details and circulate them to join the dots. Next page, slide, please, Kate. So, a bit of background on the Circular Economy Councils Fund. This particular program is part of the Recycling Victoria $380 million 10-year circular economy policy. It contains a whole lot of programs and initiatives that the state government has committed and resourced to. The Circular Economy Councils Fund is one, and it's very much under goal 2 of the policy, which is about promoting better use and products for more value. Next slide, please, Kate. So what we're talking about when we're referring to circular economy, easy way to start is talk about the opposite to the circular economy, which is the traditional linear economy, which is all about take, make and dispose. This traditional method of production is about maximising the use of raw materials, transforming them, making them into products, and eventually disposing them as unusable material. Linear economy is all about exhausting raw materials and energy, which results in greenhouse gas emissions, leading to climate change. The alternative to that is the circular economy, which is about maintaining the added value of material and about eliminating or aiming to eliminate waste as best as possible. It's concentrated on the use of products as resources, with big emphasis on design, use, reuse, recycling, and reduction of waste, as you'll see. Next slide, please, Kate. So this fund that we're talking about today, and this round 3, is all about supporting local councils to transition to the circular economy through avoiding waste going to landfill, refurbishing and resale of goods and products instead of going to landfill, recycling materials, remanufacturing those materials into other products, and reusing materials in other applications. Now, the reasons that we see for councils to apply is the circular economy is very much about boosting local economic activity and employment. Councils very much play a role in leading their community in terms of the behaviours and the practices and transitioning their community to a circular economy. It's also a great opportunity for councils to get resources and support to address local opportunities, but also collaborate with other councils on those opportunities. It's also the reasons to apply about focusing on local solutions and relevant priority and materials to your local community. And the other final reason is this is the last round of the Circular Economy Councils Fund. So great reason to apply. Next slide, please, Kate, and I will hand over to Linda Duffy, our program lead for the Circular Economy Councils Fund, to take us through the overview. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Kate. Thanks for coming along, everybody. Great to have you. I'm joining from Yorta Yorta lands up near the River Murray. So today, just to run through the overarching objectives of the fund, hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at the guidelines. We'll send the links out again following the session today, but basically the overarching objectives of this fund have not changed. So that's your project needs to meet one or more of these 3 overarching pillars, and that's decrease the amount of waste going to landfill, increase the material that's reused, repaired, repurposed or recycled, and increase local circular economy activity. So that's resulting in jobs and local businesses. The projects need to occur in Victoria and they need to be of benefit to Victoria. So next slide, Kate. The funding available this time around for round 3, the parameters are $30,000 to $500,000 maximum. So 30 is the minimum, and that can be for individual councils, for the alpine resorts, or partnerships of councils. So within that envelope of 30 to 500, we're not mandating what that mix might be. That's up to you to decide what your project is and the amount that you apply for. So next slide, Kate, please. And so for this funding round, we've significantly changed the co-contribution. So we've responded to feedback from councils. So you guys have told us that was a limiting factor. So this time, for every $5 of grant money from SV, the co-contribution from councils needs to be $1 for every $5. So of that, up to 50% of that can be in kind. So we need at least 50% of your co-contribution to be in cash. So you can see the example there. If your application is for $200,000, the co-contribution needs to be $40,000, and of that, at least $20,000 must be in cash. And you can see the relevant section of the guidelines there is in 1.2. So next slide, please, Kate. Okay, so just wanted to give you a flavour of some of the projects that have been funded successfully in the previous funding rounds and how they went about it. So for Swan Hill, they completed a feasibility study in round 1, and based on that feasibility study work that they did, they were successful getting $167,500 in round 2 as an implementation project for their mattress recycling facility. Bayside, similarly, they also did a feasibility in round 1 to look at how to go about doing their reuse repair centre or service for their community. So from that round 1 grant, they were successful for $50,000 under round 2. So interestingly, for those thinking about that reuse chip shop style of project, the feasibility study for those guys, for Bayside, the recommendation wasn't for a physical site. So they've decided to do pop-up events that are themed across the year. And then on the next slide, we've got, so Yarri Ambiat, so that they had a different basis for their successful grant for round 1. They used work that had been done in Western Australia. So for those guys, $175,000 they received in round 1 to fund kit, so to actually get the equipment to do their glass crushing operation. And that's a partnership of the 5 councils in the Wimmera Mallee. We'll hear from Lavergne later on today about how that experience has been for them. And Strathbogie, they used, it was just $10,000 they received in round 1 to do a feasibility study, and they were looking for their reuse resale shop, where to locate it and what they needed to interrogate in terms of access and how to best serve the residents. So they were successful in round 2 for $71,000 for their Nagambie Resource Recovery Centre. So that's underway at the moment. And then on the next slide, we've got, again, a different way of doing it. The City of Wyndham, they had already done an internal business case study on setting up a bulk materials centre at Werribee. So they were successful in round 1 to gaining $250,000 for that project. So I guess what we're saying is there's all manner of ways to do it. We'd encourage you to look at the 53 projects that have been funded so far under this program. We'll pop the link for you for that of where they are on the SV website. And basically to navigate there, as we've got SV website, and then you're navigating through to the funded projects for Circular Economy Council's fund. So on the next slide, we just wanted to point out that the changes, so the major changes from previous rounds to this round. So this time around, there's only one funding stream. It's not divided into feasibility and implementation. There's just one stream. As I've outlined, the co-contribution has been eased. So that's $1 from council for every $5 from SV. Councils, you can make multiple applications. So we haven't set any limits on application numbers, but all of the applications will be assessed on their merit. It's a competitive process. And if the fund is oversubscribed, then SV will apply diversity lens. So that means, as Kate will talk about later, looking at the mix of materials or the mix of geography or council types. As in previous rounds, these applications can include project management costs. So if you have staff that will be 100% dedicated to the project, that's an eligible cost to include in your application. So that could be, you might have a council staffer who does 2 days a week now, and for an extra 1 day a week, they will manage the project that you're thinking about. That extra day a week is an eligible cost to put in your application. So what we're looking for, we're really mindful, and you will be too, that we're looking for projects that will complete by June 24. So SV needs to see a really solid rationale. So the basis for your project, what it is and how you're going to adapt it. So that basis can be from, as other previous projects have done, so previous feasibility study, business case work that your council or another council somewhere else, not necessarily in Victoria, has done, projects that have been funded already, the 53 that are outlined on SV's website, or work you guys at council have done already. So something that you've got ready to go and you've got a really good basis for it. What the assessors will need to see is evidence of that rationale and how you've adapted it to your proposal. So if it's from another council to do a particular project, to demonstrate that you've really thought through how you will adapt that piece of work for your council. So we'd really encourage you to connect with the other councils, and we'll help as much as we can with that. And yeah, look at that list of the previously funded projects. So I think that's from me. I'm going to hand over to Kate now, who'll talk us through the eligibility.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Linda. Yeah, as Linda's mentioned, we really need a Victorian council to be the lead applicant, although it can be a collaborative project with other councils or local NGOs or businesses to you. And we're focusing on implementation projects for this round and projects that support the aims of the fund, all about decreasing waste to landfill, increasing the materials reused, and promoting CE within communities, hoping to increase employment and local economic activity. And also eligible are any materials apart from waste to energy. And as Linda has mentioned, we're wanting evidence from a feasibility study. That doesn't necessarily have to be yours, but wanting to see that you might have adapted it to your particular council context. And the projects have to be completed by 30th of June. So, and you've noticed we've got a bit of a focus on the reuse and resale shops in response to your feedback that lots of councils are looking to implement those at the moment. So we'll hear more about our info session on that from Linda shortly. Looking at what won't be able to be funded in this round, some of the usual suspects, projects that are sort of primarily focused on complying with the regulatory order or that don't meet planning requirements. We're also not able to fund projects that are being funded already by another source outside of your council. And I mentioned waste to energy projects can't be funded, and also any retrospective funding where you might have already started a project. Looking at due diligence, also things you will be pretty accustomed to, noting any workplace breaches need to be declared and they'll be assessed by SV. You need to have adequate insurances in place as councils and provide them to us as well down the track, and declare and manage any conflicts of interest. And you need to have sort of sufficiently progressed or completed projects previously funded by SV. But any questions on these, don't hesitate to get in touch with the grants inquiries via email that will pop up on the screen later on and is also on our guidelines page. Don't feel like, if you have questions on things that you feel might preclude you from applying, definitely reach out and confirm that, confirm these things first. Looking at the application and assessment process, this is also in Smarty Grants. So yeah, looking at just double checking it's eligible, be in touch if you have questions. The funding agreements and terms of participation are also in our guidelines. There's links there, so you don't need to hunt them out too hard, but good to be across them and create an account, start your application in Smarty Grants, and there's also support for you if you get stuck on any of those parts with Smarty Grants. We recommend saving regularly, and because it can sort of kick you off after a period of inaction. So just make sure you're regularly saving, and we've got a couple of funds open at the moment. So just double check you're in the council's fund, round 3. That one is the right one, and upload the supporting evidence that we've been talking about. The more, the better. Any supporting material you have, and make sure you've got it in by the due date, the Friday, the 31st of March. So yeah, be in touch if you have any questions or worries on those things. And looking finally from me, looking at sort of how it'll be assessed. So as Linda mentioned, it's a competitive merit-based process, and all of these criteria are on the Smarty Grants form as well. So you don't need to memorize these, but just good to think about as you're preparing your application. The assessment panel will be looking at what the project is and wanting to see how it contributes to the outcomes of the fund, and what the fund's wanting to deliver through these projects. We want to hear about why is it essential that the project is funded and what's the value that it sort of delivers. The assessment panel will want to see who will deliver it. Do you have staff resources? Describe these people in your application. And as Linda noted before, the program delivery and staff costs that are related to the project can be included in the grant amount, which is wonderful. And finally, the assessment panel want to hear how it's going to be delivered by that due date, noting that June 24. So if possible to share your project plan on that. And finally, on the assessment process, as Linda mentioned as well, there's another overlay of criteria that could be engaged by the assessment panel, looking at regional and metro applications, council sizes, the types of CE projects and materials, and really wanting to ensure that we achieve a mix of projects across. So I'm going to hand back to Linda now to share info about our next session, and I'll pop you back on the screen. Thanks so much, everyone.
Great, thanks, Kate. Okay, so from feedback from councils, people have identified that they're really keen as a first step. The resale shop would be a good thing for them to pursue for their communities. So to that end, we're having a separate session next Wednesday, 8th of March at 11, to have some councils to present about how that experience has been for them. So we'll have a mix of councils talking about the different phases that they are at in terms of setting up a resale shop. So some of them will be talking about how they've what they've found from the feasibility project rationale that they've been trying to interrogate for them, how that has panned out, what has, and sometimes the outcomes of the recommendation, like base heights, might not be what was originally envisaged. And then we've got a couple talking about the implementation of it, and for them, what those difficult issues might have been in terms of accessibility across a large shire. Where do you actually site the first or next resale shop? And then also talking about what sort of models. So is it a social enterprise that council has partnered with to run it, what lessons they've learned, what the barriers have been, and the benefits for the community, which certainly in the feedback from you, it was the social and community benefits was a big driver for people being interested in setting up resale shops. So that's next Wednesday, the 8th. And yeah, so in terms of key dates, so this session today, the fund is open at the moment. We've got the resale shop session next Wednesday. The round will close 31st of March. So as Kate has said, that's via your Smarty Grants login. So we encourage people to start early and get make sure your login's working and get any pieces of info going that you can. We're hoping to be able to announce successful projects by July. We are dependent on the Minister's office, so it's the Minister who announces the successes. So our scheduling is that if we can get announced by July, then we can start contracting in July. And for us, it's really important to try and give you as much time as possible to complete those projects by June 24. So we're aiming to give you 12 months as much as we can. So now we're just going to hear from some projects that have been running and get their take on how they've found the process, and just some tips and tricks on what has worked, what the barriers might have been, and what the successes have been. So firstly, we're going to hear from April and Merav. So April is the circular economy champion at Monash City Council, and April led the 13 council partnership on the best practice reusable nappies feasibility study, and that has led to Merav working on and leading the 14 council partnership of the implementation of the recommendations of that project. So I'll hand over firstly to April and hear from April and Merav of how they found that experience. Okay, so we're getting there. I think April, your mic might be muted. There we go.
Sorry
Also,
about that.
we've got you now. Thank you. Sorry, guys.
Here I was talking away. Hi, everyone.
Got
April
me.
here from Monash Council. So just briefly today, I'll talk about some of the project achievements from our, it was actually a 12 council collaborative project. And given we only have 12 months for the next project, I guess some of the learnings we had from such a big collaborative team project. So we did the reusable nappy feasibility study. The 12 councils are just on the screen there with their logos. I think probably the biggest standout for the project to succeed was that the 12 councils already had a really great existing relationship, and that was through forums like EdNet, through the Metro Waste, the Work, and also the Yammer group. So we already knew each other quite well and were able to work together really, really well. We did achieve some great outcomes from the project in terms of getting some really great independent research, which wasn't publicly already available from other projects, benchmarking of other existing projects, and our social research achieved a much greater feedback from the community than we anticipated. We were hoping to get 50 responses per council, and we got over 2,000 for the 12 councils. So we're really pleased with that. And we got some strong recommendations that we could then put into our next grant. So if we could go to the next slide, thank you. So I think the real keys to success were we spent a fair bit of time developing and getting agreement on our governance model. Very fortunately, we didn't have to go back to that at any point in the project, but we tried to think about all the things that could go wrong, get an agreement, put it in writing, and I think we always had that in the background to come back to. We didn't need it, but I think investing some time in getting that right is important. Our project plan was developed early on, and we built in buffers into the timeline, which I know isn't always possible with short timeframes, but something to consider. We took a lot of time to get the specifications right before we went to tender, and we got a lot of feedback from all the participating councils on that. And so I feel like we got a good outcome. I will say as well, we approached, I think, 10 consultants, and we only got 2 quotes back at the time. So potentially go wider than you think in case a lot of consultants are busy, if that's what you're doing with your project. In terms of getting feedback from 12 councils, it's quite tricky. We always committed to getting input from everyone, but we did keep the project moving forward. So we gave opportunity for people to input. We didn't wait for every decision to have input from everyone on board. I think you just have to do that with so many people involved. And then we did create some very small working groups for specific topics, like to review the procurement side of things. And then when it came to the final report, we needed some really good eyes on that to get it to the shape that we were happy to publish it. But I guess, again, the biggest takeaway for me was having those existing relationships. I wouldn't be applying for a grant to deliver in 12 months if your partners, either internally or externally, you don't know, or it might be a hard relationship. I think you've got to draw on your allies and your relationships first. So that would be my takeaways. I'll hand over to Merav.
Hi, everyone. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Yep, hi. So Merav here from Glenara, and I will just echo what April said. We're in the process of, I guess, implementing the best practice reusable nappy program, and we're probably a third way in, maybe less. So there's more to go, but my learnings so far have been very much like April, and because this is a 14 councils collaboration, having those strong relationships with the other councils is really beneficial. Keeping in mind that depending on the topic that you end up working on, but ours in particular was a bit of a high-profile nappies being a component in the garbage bin, and with councils who are moving to a fortnightly collection, that is an item of interest. So that really draws attention. So be mindful of media and take the time to address that element if it's relevant to you. But I guess the only other thing I'll add in terms of what is helpful to managing that and keeping in the timeline is also utilizing any document sharing platforms if you can, if your council allows. I find that it helps to be able to share documents instead of emailing back and forth different versions, just version control. Good collaboration, everyone contributes in real time, and it's been a real help progressing the project and trying to keep that in the time frame. And let's see how we go in a few months.
Excellent. Thank you, Mirav. Yes, I think that, as you say, the communication between all the partners is key, and I'm sure that Laverne's going to talk more to that. She's going to tell us a little bit now about the Wimmera Mallee glass crushing project. So over to you, Laverne.
Thank you. Yes, I would certainly reiterate making sure you have really good communication and understanding the needs of your partnering councils. We did it with 5 councils, and one of the things that we certainly experienced along the way was almost all 5 councils had changes in staff during that time. So we had a number of new people who were coming on partway through. And the other thing is understanding the, I guess, the sign-off requirements for each council. So we developed a memorandum of understanding. In hindsight, we probably should have worked on that much earlier than what we did, because some councils have, I guess, different degrees of delegation as to who can actually sign off on those things, and some things have to wait for certain meetings to occur and so forth. So understanding the different parameters that each council has for making sure you've got a good governance approach to your project is really important, particularly when you've got shorter time frames. Our project was a glass crusher, which we changed the project as we went along. We learned a lot of different things along the way. We started off with what was going to be a mobile glass crusher. When we started having a look more closely at what we needed, we realised that the best outcome would be for it to be in one location. We're in a very much a rural area in Western Victoria, 5 councils that are very large in area. So transporting a glass crusher around and making sure we met all our relevant OH&S requirements was really important. I guess one of the things I will also reiterate about something like a glass crusher, and again, this will depend upon your particular project, but glass crushing is not generally considered to be part of core council business. So this was something completely new to us, and has meant a lot of learning, a lot of learning curves around, how we operate it, what's the best way to operate it. And a lot of those sorts of things that perhaps we hadn't realised right up front would be some of the issues. But it's been a really useful experience for all of us, but there was some things in there that perhaps we needed to have thought through a little bit more, and I'll outline some of those. So things like dust suppression. So one of the issues around crushing glass is that you do have a lot of glass dust, silica dust, and that's certainly an issue that's been in the media a lot lately with the silicosis issue. This is not the same issue, but nonetheless, we had to make sure that we're looking after our staff. So putting in a misting system. So we've got a quote for that now. We've also had to look at increasing the size of the hopper for width of loading. The glass material, which we've been collecting since July last year. We'll have 2 other councils coming on board in April to deliver their glass to us as well. So that will significantly increase the volume of glass that we have coming through. So yeah, we were fortunate we did have that time frame that allowed us to bed down the actual glass crusher in terms of operation before we had to take on everybody else's glass. So things like having to add another conveyor belt to deal with the end product, ensuring the orientation and location of the crusher allowed for optimal operation. So we had it the wrong way around. In the first instance, it was put a certain way and it should have been put in a different way. All of these things that we've had to fix up along the way. And again, I'll go back to the decision not to have a mobile unit was a good one in the end, because it meant that we only had to make sure we had operator training for our staff. If we'd gone with the mobile unit, we would have had to have done that for every staff, and that would have been significantly more complicated with 5 other councils. We also had to develop SOPs for safe operation and so forth, again because it's not part of our core business, and that's been probably the biggest learning curve. So if you're going to have a project that is significantly different from what you already do, you need to think all those sorts of things through, because you need to make sure your staff are ready for it as well. I think that's most of it, but yeah, the things like the MOU, if you can get that done early, even before you've actually got the funding, get at least understand what's required in your MOU. That would be really good. I'll just finish off here around the glass crusher itself. Is making sure you understand what you're going to be doing with your end products. So again, that's make sure you talk to your engineers and make sure they can use that material and know what you're going to do with it. Otherwise, you've got a product you can't use, and storage for that as well. So make sure you I guess tick off with your partner councils all along the way all the things that you're going to be doing, from the collection process through to the processing, and then the end product. And I guess the one thing I'd finish off with around the glass crusher, because it sounds like it's difficult, and it has been quite difficult, but we will ultimately have some really significant savings, because the collection and processing of the glass is about 1/3 of the cost of our mixed recycling, because of the transport costs that we have going to Melbourne. So that's ultimately been the advantage for our councils. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Laverne. So I'm not entirely sure if this is the Luke or myself into this section, but I can take it away, Luke, if you're happy. Good eye. Terrific. Thanks, Laverne. I think that's a really good example. Yarri Ambiac have done all the learning. So that's, if that's the sort of project someone's interested in, that's the type of thing that you could lean on to do an application. So I think, I really like to thank April, Marav and Laverne for sharing how they've gone. I think, there's been a massive amount that has been learned along the way from those projects from the previous rounds, and we're just getting to a stage where we're getting really good outcomes from those. Okay, so just in summary, so to wrap up, it's good we're running ahead of time, so pretty much, yeah, just wanted to, yeah, thank everybody for coming along, thank our presenters, and just to do a bit of a wrap around, yeah, if you've got a project idea, we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A boxes, but if you've got an idea that you're even only half thinking of, pop it in the Q&A chat on the side, and your email address so everyone knows how to contact you, so that then even if, you know, if it's a tricky project, that's exactly the sort of thing that we're after. So this funding round is to tease out the things that are of difficulty to council and give an opportunity for you to do something about them. So after today, we'll share this PowerPoint slide deck and any of those joint project ideas that have come either through this channel in the Q&A or the Grants Inquiries email. We'll pull together some FAQs and get those lists of the funded projects out to you. And from there, yeah, just the reminders about the things that are coming up. As Kate and Luke and I have said, yeah, so we've got the session next Wednesday for the tip shop theme. Get into that application early, make sure your Smarty Grants is working. And I think you guys will know we can't, for probity, we can't help with your project, but we're really aware of the gap that has been left by our colleagues that were the waste resource recovery groups. So that work those guys did in linking you together, we also know from feedback that's a gap. So wherever we can, we will link you with other councils, send you whatever information that we can, but we can't help with your project itself. So that's our parts for council's fund. So just to let you know, as Kate said earlier, there's a couple of other grants that are available at the moment. So the Buy Recycle Champions have got an expression of interest that's out at the moment. It's closing at the end of this week. We can send you the link for the online form for that. And the Circular Economy Household Education Fund is also open at the moment for councils, and that closes 17th of March. So from there, I might hand over to you, Luke, if you wanted to just talk through those couple of questions we've got, or any other questions people may have. Thanks.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, well, I suppose we had two good questions. All right, there's another one there, but two good questions. One initially was around, you know, often we see community organisations that might be looking at proposals. Natasha actually gave a good question about a men's shed wanting to do a project. In essence, this round is for councils to apply. So a community group would not be eligible to apply for funding under this grant. However, a council could apply to get some funding to do a project in partnership with a local community and community group. So there's potential there. That said, there's also a separate communities fund that has been running that has supported a number of projects. So we'll provide a bit further information on that particular fund. But yeah, I suppose the door is still open for proposals that are applied for by councils that can in effect partner with a local community organisation, NGO, to run a sort of initiative in the local municipality. There was also a good question from Michael around the proposal that may not have a feasibility study done or a business case done already. Yeah, and we're very aware of that. I suppose because it's the last round of this fund, we're very much about supporting projects that are going to be implementing initiatives on the ground. But we, as Linda said, there may not be time to do a standalone business case or feasibility study for your proposal, Michael, but we are more than happy try and connect the dots between what you might be proposing and what another initiative that may have been done in another council, and then apply what has been learnt and proposed in that other council to your situation and proposal. So yeah, putting forward that idea in the grants inquiries email or in the chat, Q&A chat now is strongly encouraged. I do have, so Kate put a comment in there about if anyone's interested in council reuse tip shops. Yeah, we've supported a number of these type of initiatives in earlier rounds. So yeah, more than happy to play that connecting dots with other councils. So Mountsville and Mount Alex councils are interested in learning more there. So great, keep them coming. I think that's about it, Linda, from questions. Oh, sorry, there's one there from Steve that snuck in quickly. Nice one. So there's some timber material there suggested from Steve. So that's a good one. We can take that. Just trying to think. I think, Steve, what we might do is go back and have a look at that question you've got around a potential proposal and provide you some written advice in the chat, in the document that goes out at the end of this week. But thanks for the question.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's one that we might pop through our grants inquiries, make sure we've got a good answer for you, Steve.
And likewise, another good question from Alina east of me in East Gippsland around an idea proposal there around education. Again, we'll just need to look at that, Alina, because it does sort of fit in community engagement and education space. So we'll just need to understand that. I take your point about using recycled materials, but we'll provide a written response to that by the end of the week.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I guess on that, that's the value of looking back at the projects that have been funded under this program already, because we've got a couple of projects that have done the Circular Economy Hub idea. So we can link you with those guys, and that might help with the basis for your application. Excellent. I'm just wondering if we leave the Q&A open, so perhaps we're good to wrap up this formal presentation part, but if we leave the Q&A boxes open so that people can keep adding and putting their project ideas in, and then we might close that out at our 11:30 end time, if that sounds like a good plan. Great. Okay, so I think from there, yeah, great, big thank you to everybody for joining. Really hoping that we get some great applications in. We're looking forward to seeing them. We know you're all busy. We know that councils have got a lot of impost on their time with curbside reform and impacts of COVID and other things. So we really, yeah, we value your work, and we really want to help you make it continue and be better. So thank you. Looking forward to those applications coming, and thank you for your time today. That's it from me. Thank you.
There's another question that's popped on there about a potential project assisting local businesses to be more CE focused. And I know we've had projects similar to that in the past. Luke, would you say that's eligible for this implementation round?
Yes, definitely, Kate. So again, we've had a couple of projects that have worked on circular economy precincts for small, medium enterprises. So yeah, we'll pop the links for those across to you.
Wonderful. There's not too many people left on the call anymore, but leaving it open if you wanted to add your questions still. But we'll finish up. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, cheers.